people aren't respecting your boundaries, it's probably because they suck. I'm gonna keep it so for real with you guys in this video as to why you're setting these boundaries. You're letting people know where your boundaries are, but they don't really seem to be taking them seriously. But before we can get into that, I wanna talk about what boundaries actually are. I read this amazing book called Boundaries, and in this book, the author describes boundaries as a fence that surrounds your home. And it lets you know where your home and your property starts and where it ends. I grew up in a very unique situation where my dad and his sister, my aunt, built houses right next door to each other, and we shared a backyard. So if that helps you understand why my boundaries for the longest time were all messed up, it's because even this little fence metaphor didn't apply to me, because although we had a fence on the left side of our house and they had a fence on the right side of their house, there was no actual fence separating our house from theirs. And that is so symbolic. I've never actually said this out loud, but that is so symbolic of the kind of codependent relationships that I was raised in as someone from an Arab community. The community and the collective is often prioritized over the individual. And that's why I love talking about boundaries, because I love that. I'm not here to come and give you this westernized, you need to just worry about yourself and put your breathing mask on before you put someone else's on. Like, there's certain moments where, yes, I agree with that theoretically, but I also understand that I come from a beautiful culture where that doesn't always feel like the most practical or accessible or authentic way to be. So when you do think about yourself as a home, there is a fence that you are able to build, and only you are able to build. Like, where you start, where you end, and where somebody else begins. And this really, really helps with these codependent relationships that a lot of us are in, where we, especially in communities of color, are taught to prioritize our family or our friends or our partner's feelings before us. In that book, he talked about the difference between a burden and a load. And I promise you, like, you probably needed to hear this one years ago, because that's how I felt when I read it. Think of a load of laundry. A load is something you can handle. These are the issues that spark up in your life that are manageable to you. It's finding your own job, paying your own bills, making yourself something to eat. Whatever it is, they might feel stressful. For sure, it's a load that you're carrying, but it's something that can be carried reasonably by one person. Obviously, everyone has different capacity, but you know what a load is in your life. A burden are things that pop up in your life, whether it's your life immediately or somebody that you're connected to, that cannot possibly be carried by one person. The problem with boundaries is some people treat their loads like burdens, and some people treat their burdens like loads. And these people, they find each other. What does that mean? There's people who feel like they can't even handle the things that are in their own life, and they would rather just like put that on somebody else. They don't want to take responsibility for the things that they are responsible for. They'd rather throw that and make someone else deal with it. And there are people who allow other people to burden them with things that they should not be carrying on their own. And when I say these people find each other, I mean these people find each other. Because if you're someone who's a people pleaser, who's constantly doing things for other people and enabling other people, who do you think is the exact type of person that's going to be attracted to you? The people who don't want to take responsibility for anything. The people who, they're like, oh, well, I mean, she said she'll do it, so what's the problem? I don't want to do it. I know it's my responsibility, or maybe they don't know it's their responsibility, but whether they know or not, they don't want to take that responsibility. And you just said you'll do it for me, so why would I not give you my laundry to fold? Why would I not give you this baggage to carry if you said you're willing to carry it? And so with people who have messed up boundaries, they end up doing all of that. They end up allowing people into their homes, even though it's not their home. They give that person the keys to their homes, and that person trashes the home. And so you're left with other people's trash, other people's mess that you volunteered to clean up because you gave them the key and you gave them the right to do that. And now you're in your home angry at them. But whose fault is that? Like, let's be so for real. Whose fault is that? The reason that a lot of people set, if you're someone who sets boundaries and you're like, no, Rima, like I took the key away. I took the key away. Okay, that's an amazing start. A lot of people think that boundaries start and end by just saying what you mean. Saying, I no longer want this to be the case, or I'm currently focusing on myself. That's literally more than halfway there. That's amazing, and you should truly, truly applaud yourself for stating an intention and drawing a line in the sand, okay? The problem is, if you have people-pleasing tendencies, you might catch yourself asking the person who you set a boundary with if your boundary is okay. I had someone in my life recently do this with me. They set a boundary. I was so happy. Whenever people set boundaries, by the way, like, I literally have this moment in my brain where I'm happy for them. I don't even care if those boundaries affect me negatively. Like, if someone says, I don't want to talk to you about this right now, I get happy because I'm like, yes, they're prioritizing themselves. And now I know that we can have a healthy relationship because I don't have to sit there and wonder if they're resenting me for something or if I'm doing something wrong. It creates clarity, right? But they set a boundary and then they kept asking me if I was okay with it. Like, did that bother you or did it upset you? And I mean, if you ask one time, maybe that's fine. But like, you're basically asking me for permission for you to set a boundary. Are you good? Like, that is your boundary. You never need to ask somebody when you draw a line in the sand about something that makes you feel safe. What they need to ask themselves, and this has nothing to do with you, this is not your responsibility, is if they're comfortable being in a relationship with you, whether it's a friendship, whatever, if they're comfortable with the nature of your relationship given the new boundary that you set, and that's their right. You might set a boundary and say, I no longer want to go out to clubs, I don't know. And you might have that going out friend. Everyone has that going out friend. And that going out friend might hear you say that and feel like, okay, well, I mean, I don't want to talk to you as much, or I don't want to be as close to you because I'm in a phase of my life where I go out Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and that's when I hit you up, is when I'm going out. I don't, like, we're just naturally not going to be as close, and that's fine. It's not a punishment. You set a boundary. They assessed your boundary and determined where they wanted to fit in your life. That person also might see your boundary of not wanting to go out, and they're the going out friend, but they're like, you know, it turns out I actually value her for her energy, not for her getting dressed and coming out with me. So let me see if I can meet her halfway, and maybe I'll invite myself over or invite her over my house and we could have like a girls' night in or something, because that person saw your boundary, respected it, and then determined where they wanted to fit in your life. How people respond to your boundaries does not say anything about the validity of your boundaries. As long as your boundaries are not infringing on their right to live their life the way they want to. So here's the part where some people get it messed up. That is not a boundary, boo. That's not a boundary. That's toxic and that's abusive. If you're doing something, if you setting a boundary infringes on somebody in their own privacy of their own home, able to live the life that they want to live it, then that's not a boundary. That's you actually crossing their boundaries. If you said, I have a boundary where you can't say these things, no. You have a boundary where you don't want to be around people who say these things, that's fine. It's gonna be hurtful, but you can't control what someone does in their own space. So if you are actually setting a boundary that doesn't hurt other people, like it's not infringing on their rights or their life, it's just making your space a safer one for you, other people have the right to determine how they want to fit in your life after the fact. And if they make a choice that is sad for you, you also can't have your cake and eat it too. Just because they've assessed your boundary and determined where they want to fit in, and if it's not the ideal place that you want them in, you have to understand that that doesn't mean you should adjust your boundary to please them. If these are your non-negotiables to feeling safe and honored and valued and loved, and someone doesn't want to be as close to you as a result of it, or someone's not happy about it, then that's on them to deal with. You don't need to ask somebody's permission. Nobody's gonna take you seriously. If you're constantly asking for their approval or permission for you to set a specific boundary, they're not gonna look at it as a boundary anymore. because you're basically telling them that the rigidity of this boundary is dependent on whether you approve of it or not. That's not a boundary. That's a question. And a lot of people would be in their right mind to test that boundary because you've kind of made them question the credibility of it. The other huge mistake that I see, actually in the Set Boundaries, Find Peace book, the author of that book talks about this. So both of those books are good. I would totally recommend audio booking, like if you have Audible or something, getting them and just listening to them throughout the day, because in that book, she talks about, I think, what's called porous boundaries, which is what I just described. And these are boundaries, like if you think of something that's porous, it has a bunch of holes in it, like a sponge. It absorbs a lot of BS. Boundaries should create clarity. The other mistake that I see a lot of people, oh my God, a lot of people make when they're first setting boundaries, and I'm sure I was guilty of this. When I was on a boundary high, I was like, oh my God, I could do this, boom, 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 are the rigid boundaries that come across very abrasive and defensive, and they make other people feel like you're accusing them of something. My love, if you have your power, which you do, and setting an intention and a boundary is within your power, you don't need to yell at someone for them to listen. Set the boundary. Give them a chance to mess up before you yell at them about messing up. So instead of telling your mom, you will not walk into my room when I'm on work calls because I work from home and this is my time, so you will respect my work. Imagine telling an Arab mom that, by the way. But like, I know a lot of us have issues with our immigrant parents if we're living at home or if we're staying with our parents, and you know, remote work is a thing now. I am sure that a lot of our parents are like, you're on your computer, you're in your room, sometimes you're on calls. When you're not on calls, I walk in on your room and I tell you to do stuff. Like, it's not a big deal, you're not on a call. But it's like, okay, but it's 9 to 5 and I'm still working, right? So the boundary that you are wanting to set is a valid boundary. Mom or mama, I know that it seems like I'm free because I'm home, but understand I work from home. So from these hours, I'm expected to work just as if I was in an office. You can say it in a gentle, firm but gentle way, I guess, like firm but compassionate way, where you don't assume that their intention is to infringe on those boundaries. When you come across like all rah, 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 it actually makes you look powerless. It makes you look weaker because you feel the need to be so assuming of what they're gonna do next, that you just look defensive and helpless. When you come to people, setting a very clear boundary, and the boundary in the one that I just said is literally like, between 9 to 5, please don't interrupt my work. You're assuming that their intention was good, or at the very least neutral. Regardless what their intention is or is not, this is what you need. You make it about your feelings and what you need, not about what they are doing wrong or how they are making you feel. It's about you and your needs. And 9 times out of 10, most people who are mature will listen to that. But in the 1 time out of 10, or even more, depending on who you have in your life, that people don't listen to it, what happens next is what's important. So people will violate your boundaries, not because they're trying to violate your boundaries, but because you just updated them. Like it takes time for people to for the software update to update. Like, people need time to get used to this new version of yourself, even and especially if you've made it super clear. If they're so used to doing something and you switch it up on them one day, which is your right, you can't be mad that they went back to what you've been doing for the past 5 years. What happens next is what's important. You need to correct them after they violated your boundary in a gentle and firm way. You just redirect them. And that is why people don't take you seriously. Is number one, the way that you're setting the boundary is either too porous or too abrasive for no reason. It just sounds helpless. You don't sound like you're actually in control of this thing. No one can really take it serious. But even if you are setting it in a way where people can take it seriously, when they cross the boundary, which is natural, not to compare people to dogs, but really, I learned a lot training my brother's puppy, okay? You try to teach it the first several times what to do, and it's gonna mess up before it finally gets it right. People are similar. It's human nature for people to do what's comfortable for them. And yes, you've made violating your boundaries comfortable because you didn't make it a boundary before. So when they cross that thing just naturally, gently redirect them, gently remind them, assume the best. And that makes you look so powerful. Like, you don't look like you're so helpless and afraid. You look like you're powerful and you're in control. And even more importantly, it shows the people in your life that you respect them and that you trust them enough to show up in a way that keeps them in your life. Because that's what you want ultimately. Like, I know you're not watching this thinking of the people that you're happy don't talk to you anymore. Like, if there's certain people in your life that you've cut off or have distanced from you because of your boundaries, you don't care about that, but you care about the people that you're afraid are going to trample all over your boundaries. And I promise you that approaching them through compassion and approaching them through a place of assuming the best while you remain firm and calm is the way to get people to respect your boundaries so much. Trust me. Just try it out. Set a boundary this week that you have been afraid to set. And please come back to this video and let me know how it goes. I love you so much. And as always, stay powerful, my loves.